The two big stories that I think are going to hit us today are, number one, the presumed death of Yevgeny Prigozhin, and number two, the rise, the size of the asylum backlog figures, which are more than 175,000 people waiting for a decision on whether they will be granted refugee status. So this is by the end of June 2023. It's 44% higher than last year. So whatever Rishi Sunak says about stopping the boats or bringing the numbers down, the numbers have actually gone up in the Home Office. And it's all about the languor, the torpor, the failure, the laziness of the Home Office. That's what it is. It's about the hostile environment which came in under Theresa May, and this was a sort of excuse just simply to put down their tools and stop doing the work. And no matter how much people sort of pretend to be working, the reality is, if you compare the amount of people who are processed before 2000 and the amount of people who are processed afterwards, the figure just gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and then Theresa May's edict about the hostile environment just gives legitimacy to laziness. Anyway, it makes me think that the two big stories really are Suella Braverman and her presiding over this chaos, and Prigozhin and his presumed death. And it makes me think about the quality of evil, and I talked about it a few times. I hope I've been fairly careful to say that I think evil is something that that comes in rather than something that somebody is. Somebody can be inhabited by evil. Somebody can take on evilness, but essentially it's something that happens to perfectly ordinary, rather boring people. And I can't think of anybody more boring, frankly, than Putin. I think Suella Braverman is probably fairly dull. And we go back to the Eichmann thing and to that rather brilliant quotation by the journalist who was observing the trial. Remember, Eichmann was picked up in Argentina and then taken for trial in Israel in the early 1960s, and it was a sensational moment when we got to see one of the people who had been involved in the Holocaust. And Hannah Arendt coined the phrase "the banality of evil," and he just looked boring. And this then spawns things like the two great experiments that lie behind the rise of reality TV, the Milgram experiment and the Zimbardo experiment, the prisoners and the guards and all this. So will ordinary people do dreadful things? Of course, those two experiments were fake, and the results were faked, and the results, bizarrely, were actually filmed. Milgram himself made the first reality TV show, in effect, by filming his own experiment and making sure he got the results that he wanted. How do people respond to the demands of authority figures when they feel they're being watched? This is Big Brother. This is this is Big Brother without alcohol, and it's exactly the same sort of thing. It's then a very short leap from that to The Family, The Real World, Survivor, or even in its original form, the one which was done in Sweden, the Expedition Robinson. It was still produced, I think, by an American called Gary Carter. Gary Carter, I think, Gary Carter. But it led to the first suicide, the first of, I think, 52 or 53 suicides, which can be directly attributed to the experience of being on reality TV and that feeling that you have lost agency. And that was a fellow called Salisa. He was a Bosnian refugee, and he was the first person to be voted off this show. And the people who were on the show with him said they voted him off because he was boring, because he was dull. But he went back home, he told his wife he was anxious about his edit. He was anxious about how he would come across when the show was finally aired. Come on, if you all right, you're going to stay there. The cat is screaming for attention because he can hear me talking, and this Salisa flew home from the show, and then he killed himself. And he had no history of mental health problems. He had there were no warnings about this. But the problem with this sort of tragedy is the something tipped him over the edge, and that something seems to be that loss of agency, that fear of a lack of control, and that experience of having been controlled, having been manipulated, because reality TV is not just about observation, it's about manipulation. And increasingly, since Big Brother and the addition of alcohol and the addition of probes and twists and so on, it's about how will ordinary people respond with a little pressure. And I have no doubt at all that Prigozhin was an ordinary and perfectly good guy. And he was just pushed a little bit more and a little bit more, and he tried pushing back. He tried leading that march into Moscow. And we are told, if we look at Russian, at the Wagner Telegram channels at the moment, they say that if Prigozhin has indeed been killed in the plane crash, then they will march on Moscow again. And Moscow, I'm sure, will be ready for them. They'll be only too happy to gun the lot down. Or they will topple Putin. Who knows what will happen? Because in the end, who knows what people are capable of? People are capable of quite dark things, but for the most part, people are capable of very good things. When people are left on an island, we think, what is Lord of the Flies? Well, that's not the reality. The reality is something like the Tongan schoolboys who were stranded on the Atta Island for 18 months. They cooperated. They worked together rather than against each other. They didn't divide into tribes. They found a way to deal with one another. And I'm sure, given... All right, come on, up you come. Here he is. Now you can sit down and be happy. When you see, this is a happy cat who a few minutes ago just wanted attention. He heard me talking, and he wanted to be part of the conversation, and that's it. And for the most part, people just want that community, whether that is a community that's doing something good or doing something bad. And I think it's very infectious to be around people who are bad. And I think, a few hours, a few days in the company of good people, and Mr. Putin would be a saint. Similarly, Mr. Prigozhin, if he has survived in some way, it doesn't take much to push people back into sanity and back into positivity. But it also, I don't think, takes a great deal to push people over the edge, and that can manifest in evil. And I think the more evil one gets involved in, the further into that pit one sinks. And if one is surrounded by people encouraging one into that, or numbing one's senses with alcohol and with authority, taking away one's own sense of control, taking away one's own sense of time, one's own sense of objectivity, it is very easy to do things that I think ultimately one will regret. And that is a great problem.